What is a so-called ghost gun? What is Polymer 80? Why is a story involving an ATF invasion of Polymer 80 important for Christmas? And what does it tell us about at least two major news media outlets and our rights? Let's explore these important matters. And I think it's best to start with Polymer 80 and what the U.S. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives recently did to them. Hi everyone, I'm Gardner Goldsmith for MRCTV. Well, Polymer 80 is a Nevada-located company that's become one of the most popular manufacturers of firearm parts and kits in the world. Specifically, they sell pistols, pistol frames, and assemblies, as well as parts and accessories, and 80% lower kits for pistols and ARs. And it's that last bit that's made them a new target for the ATF. In fact, tax-paid armed agents of the ATF entered their property on Thursday, December 10th, served them with a search warrant, and might claim they've engaged in illegal activity. Forrest Cooper of recoilweb.com gives us the opening salvo. Thursday, December 10th, 2020, the ATF entered the property of Polymer 80 in Nevada, seizing both documents and what we expect to be part of their inventory as evidence. If the raid doesn't raise hairs, the warrant affiliated with it does, as the build kits were to be suddenly considered as serial number requiring firearms. By this determination, Polymer 80 could face ramifications for failing to pay taxes affiliated with firearm sales and be considered an illegal weapons manufacturer. So far, so bad. But even though the minute legal detail is irrelevant when it comes to gun rights, what exactly are build kits or 80% lower kits? As 80-lower.com explains, when it comes to firearms, when people say the phrase lower, it generally means a lower receiver. A lower receiver in general is the part of the firearm that houses the bolt, firing mechanism, and generally the action of a firearm. Generally, lower receivers refer to AR-15 lower receivers. An AR-15 lower receiver houses the fire control group, the magazine well, and connects the buffer assembly to the weapon. And there are other salient points to note when thinking about the Byzantine rules and regulations the feds impose on lower kit makers and sellers. Recoil Web, 80-lower, and other sources note that lower 80 kits are not legally considered to be firearms, or they weren't until this raid indicated that the ATF appears to be further degrading the right to keep and bear arms. And there is no federal firearms license needed or supposed to be needed to sell them. Of course, this is the federal government, and it's already unconstitutional creation, the ATF. And so the ATF breaches the Second Amendment through its very existence. So the idea that it will not find new ways to attack the right to keep and bear arms is pretty much a pipe dream. But that explanation of ATF tyranny seems to be precisely what CNN actually admires in its reporting on this story. In a piece published December 11th, the network's Scott Glover explained a bit more about these kits and why they're called ghost guns. But he did it within a larger context, a kind of dissociative alarmist propaganda about the kits, and as if they themselves were committing the acts of evil. Wrote Glover, guns produced from such kits are known as ghost guns because they do not contain serial numbers and are considered untraceable. And Glover made sure to rattle off a list of crimes in which the perpetrators used untraceable ghost guns, or at least were connected to the ghost guns, as if to justify the ATF move, summing things up with this. ATF officials, based on data from the agency's National Tracing Center, estimate that approximately 10,000 ghost guns were recovered in the U.S. last year, including about 2,700 in California. Polymer 80 guns were used in, quote, hundreds of crimes throughout the United States, end quote, and about 15 of the company's weapons were recovered during homicide investigations in California, the document states. Of course, recovered guns and guns used in crimes are two different things. And the closest Glover gets to mentioning crimes committed with Polymer 80 products comes in his last statement about the 15 recovered during homicide investigations. No indication as to whether those were recovered as possible murder weapons or just having been recovered on the scene. But none of that is actually relevant anyway. Trying to link a product to the evil of its user is unfair, negligent, unscrupulous, illogical, and dangerous. How many people use automobiles to commit homicides? Should the sellers of auto parts be considered as culpable in the evil committed by those who use the cars? Will the FBI go after gun oil sellers and pipe cleaner makers because those tools are used for maintenance of guns? How about holster makers if a criminal draws a gun from a holster? And how about the makers of safes or actual home builders in general, both of which allow gun owners to keep their metal weapons inside, away from the elements that could rust them or gum them up with dirt? And will the FBI arrest farmers for supplying the food eaten by some perpetrator of physical assault because the criminal used the food to maintain his physical strength? And what about teachers who might have taught a person to read? After all, people typically read the instructions on how to build ghost gun kits. So that process of reading as well could be a component of the crime, if you want to draw this all out. And then there's the very terminology of ghost gun itself. These aren't guns at all. They're gun parts, period. Yet the ATF and FBI claimed the company was manufacturing illegal firearms. Now, perhaps someone could challenge an FBI agent to pick up any one of those parts and actually make it fire a bullet. After all, as Glover writes, on Thursday, federal agents armed with a search warrant raided the company Polymer 80 based on suspicion that it was illegally manufacturing and distributing firearms. The Wall Street Journal's Zusha Ellenson also seemed blithely unconcerned with the change in the ATF position about the parts that until Thursday, the agency beneficently allowed companies to sell without calling them firearms. Here's a quote, and while you hear it, consider the word determined. The probe focuses on Polymer 80's buy, build, shoot kit, which includes the parts to build a ghost handgun. The kit, which Polymer 80 sells online, meets the definition of a firearm, ATF investigators determined, according to the warrant application. Now, some might look at the word determined and give it a lot of merit, feel a lot of weight packed behind it. But in this case, determined means made it up, contrary to what the agency had told manufacturers for years. And that itself ought to send shivers through the spines of folks who acknowledge the primacy of individual rights. Not only is the existence of the ATF specifically forbidden by the Second Amendment's prohibition against any level of government interfering with the individual right to keep and bear arms within this already unconstitutional existence, these bureaucrats and lawyers seem to feel that they can change their own rules and definitions to further put people at risk at any time they want. All doing this while writers for CNN and the Wall Street Journal report on it as if the ATF move is normal procedure and beneficial to American safety. Well, as we and others have reported many, many times, and as FBI uniform crime statistics reveal, when more people have firearms, they deter criminals from engaging in violent crime around them. 2 years ago, Paul Hassai of Forbes reported on a 2013 study ordered by the also unconstitutional Centers for Disease Control that added even more evidence indicating how important firearm ownership is to stopping violent crime. Quoting from the story he offered, almost all national survey estimates indicate that defensive gun uses by victims are at least as common as offensive uses by criminals, with estimates of annual uses ranging from about 500,000 to more than 3 million in the context of about 300,000 violent crimes involving firearms in 2008. And the more impediments the ATF puts in the way of people obtaining firearms, the more in danger they will be, because criminally minded people do not abide by gun restriction statutes. Which brings us to our final observations. First, on the principled side, consider the profoundly misguided subhead of the Wall Street Journal piece, which reads, ATF suspects Polymer 80 of breaking firearms laws, a sign that law enforcement is looking closer at makers of DIY gun kits. In the United States and any nation state that respects the natural right to self-defense, there are to be no such things as firearm laws, period. That's forbidden by the Second Amendment and forbidden by God. But in thinking about what the ATF has done to Polymer 80, we can also consider this. We can consider that as Christmas approaches, as that time when Christians really take stock of their Creator and get together with friends and family to celebrate, many of the Polymer 80 workers and owners are in legal and employment limbo. They're without any semblance of confidence that they will not be shut down by government. And many of those who receive the gun parts from the company are now worried that the ATF will use the records to persecute them as well.
And it looks like, regarding at least this specific kit, this item, this SKU that they're offering from Polymer 80, that the ATF not only has an issue with Polymer 80, but enough of an issue where at least in one instance it appears, according to TFB and their journalism here, that now they have a problem with the end user having it and they're coming to people's homes. Turn it in or we'll get a warrant and raid you. I know most of you that built these, you're doing nothing wrong. You just wanted to have the right to defend yourself, your family, and your country. And you just want privacy. You're never going to do anything wrong with your 80 or your kit. You just don't trust the government and don't feel any need to tell them what you're doing in the privacy of your own home. And like I mentioned last night, so many people are just tinkerers. You like to go work on your Harley. You like to work on your pickup truck. Maybe your jet ski. Whatever it is that you do. And this is tinkering for a lot of you. And it's a good, clean hobby.
Those are powerful messages. They're human, spiritual messages. And unfortunately, I think they're messages that the bureaucrats at the ATF appear not to understand. Thank you for understanding them. And thank you for watching. Remember, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed and please hit the like button. Please share these with friends as well. That really helps out. And of course, we'll see you at MRCTV.org. That's MRCTV.org. We'll see you on Facebook. We'll see you on Twitter. We'll see you on Instagram. We'll see you on Parler. And if you get the opportunity, remember, you can get some great items at the MRC store. It's MRC-store. Get ready for Christmas. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. For MRC TV, I'm Gardner Goldsmith.